Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn Tosfos Dibra Maschil, Kishnei Bnei Adam Dami Upater. Let's begin by looking at the flowchart of the Gemara so we can see what Tosfos is coming to explain. So here in the Gemara presented the question of Rabbi Yechanan: if somebody threw an item 4 Amos in Rishus Harabim, and then he ran and quoted himself, is he chayiv or not? And the Gemara asked, what's the question? Of course he's chayiv. He did the entire malacha. So here we presented the answer of Avada Bar Ava, that the question is Shnei Koiches Ba'adam Echad. When there's 2 koiches in one person, there was the koich of throwing, and then he ran to catch it, the koich of anachim. Do we view it as 2 people and he's pater, or do we view it as 1 person and he's chayiv? So let's see the general outline of Tosfos, what exactly we're going to be discussing about this part of the Gemara. So in the Gemara we presented the question of Rabbi Yechanan: if a person threw an object and ran to catch it, do we view it as 2 people and he's pater, or as 1 person and he's chayiv? So what we're going to do in Tosfos is, Tosfos will present 2 ways of understanding this case. The case itself will explain there's 2 ways of understanding it, with 2 ways of understanding the question. Do we view it as 2 people? Do we view it as 1 person? First we'll present 2 ways of understanding the case, and then we'll present the 2 ways of understanding. We'll actually present 1 way and understanding, and then the other way and the understanding. Let's begin. So Rabbi Yechanan asked, if a person threw an object and ran to catch it, do we view it as 2 people and he's pater? So Tosfos starts off by explaining the view of looking at it as 2 people, meaning just like by 2 people, the first person is pater when 1 person threw it and another one ran to catch it. The first person is pater since he didn't have any hanacha whatsoever. There was no hanacha at all. So too here we'll say the same thing. Since he stopped the object in its path, it didn't allow it to rest where it would have rested based on the original koyach, the first when he threw it. So it's not a hanacha since it didn't come from the throw. The akira and the hanacha are disconnected because the hanacha of that akira never actually happened. So therefore it comes out that the akira didn't have an hanacha. The hanacha was a separate act, so it wasn't connected to the akira, and therefore we look at it as 2 people and he's pater. So that's 1 way of looking at it. Or maybe it's like 1 person. We look at it as 1 person and we say, since he did the akira and the hanacha, he's chayiv. This person did the akira, he made it go the 4 amos from Rishus Harabim, he did the hanacha, he did all 3 parts of the malacha, and therefore he's chayiv. So this is 1 way of understanding it. And now Tosfos presents Rabbeinu Chananel, who learns it very differently. Rabbeinu Chananel has an opposite girsa. His girsa is, do we look at it as 2 people and he's chayiv, or do we look at it as 1 person and he's pater? And he learns the case differently as well. He learns that the person threw the object and he didn't run to catch it in its path, but rather he ran to catch it and he allowed it to rest where it would have rested. So he didn't stop it from it going in its path, but rather he went to the path of the object and he stood over there and let it and caught it. So what that would look like is he threw it high up, it would travel a distance of 4 amos, and he walked those 4 amos and he just caught it, he allowed it to continue in its path and it landed in his hand. And the way he looks at it is as follows: is it like 2 people and he's chayiv? Like we said earlier, what is 2 people? Where do we see that 2 people are chayiv? That if the second person stayed in his place and caught it, he's chayiv. So that's the case. The individual didn't stop it in its path, but rather he caught it in the natural path of the object. And so therefore it's looked at as when 1 person throws it and it landed into another's hand, and the other person didn't move to get it, but he just stayed in his place and it fell into his hands. So is it like 2 people and he's chayiv? Like we said earlier, that if the second person stayed in his place and caught it, he's chayiv. So too here, if he didn't stop the object in its path, he'll be chayiv, since the akira does have its anacha, so therefore he would be chayiv. Or maybe oidilma, it's like 1 person and he's pater. What do we mean when we say it's like 1 person and he's pater? Just like if a person would take an object from his right hand and pass it over to his left hand, even if it traveled the distance of 4 amos, he's going to be pater. So do we say the same thing here? That since the person threw up the object from 1 hand and then he went the distance of 4 amos and he caught it with his own hands, we look at it as if he passed it from 1 hand to the other hand and he's pater. And both of these explanations are discussed at length in the Mefarshim to understand what's the logic behind each of them. What's the logic behind the first way of understanding it? What's the logic of Rabbeinu Chananel? Why are we comparing it to when a person passes it from 1 hand to the other? In that case, he's standing in 1 place. Here he's moving. So these things are discussed in Mefarshim. At any rate, what Tosfos is telling us is that there's 2 ways of understanding the Gemara. So just the body of Tosfos, not the deeper understanding, is the body of Tosfos is simply to present to us that there's 2 ways of understanding the question of Rabbi Yechanan, in what case it's referring to, whether he caught the object in its path or whether he didn't catch the object in its path. He allowed it to continue on its own path. And the question would be, if we look at it as 2 people in the first way, he'll therefore be pater, because since he stopped it in its path, when 2 people did that, they would be pater, or as 1 person, and we said since he did the whole malacha, he's chayiv. Or the second way of understanding it is, if we look at it as two people, he's chayiv, since he didn't stop it in its path, he allowed it to continue in its path. Just like by two people there's a chayiv, so to here there's a chayiv. Or do we say it's like one person, and if he passed it from one hand to the other, where then he's pater, so to here he'll be pater.